I'd like to welcome everybody today. My name is Joe Lamargo, and I am the village's Deputy Clerk and Public Information Officer. On behalf of Mayor Dan McLaughlin, I thank you for joining us this morning. Mayor McLaughlin, as you know, hosts senior coffees each spring and fall, inviting area seniors to stop in for a cup of coffee and some refreshments, bringing in speakers of interest for you. Unfortunately, Mayor McLaughlin is unable to join us this morning, but he wishes you well and hopes that you enjoy today's presentation. However, I would like to introduce the newest member of the Orland Park Board of Trustees. He is an Orland Park native, Dan Calandrello. The Village Board voted on September 16th to approve Dan filling the vacant seat on the board. Dan holds a law degree from John Marshall Law School and received his undergraduate degree from Marquette University, where he served as a student government president. He is a Marist High School graduate who served as a staff assistant for the U.S. House of Representatives in Washington, D.C. after graduating college. He currently serves us as an assistant state's attorney with the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. So please give us a warm welcome and welcoming Trustee Dan Calandrello.
Good morning, everyone. So sorry that Dan McLaughlin couldn't come. I guess I'll substitute another Dan for you. But I'm pleased to be here today and excited actually for the presentation. Like Joe said, that I was a long-term, I've been here since I was born in 1984. So long-time resident, and I'm happy to be here to celebrate this event with the historian of Orland Park. I know that Margie has been kind of our historian full-time. She's been a lifelong resident here, or a long-term resident here, and it's really excited to be here and to witness that. But like I said, Margie actually works over across the courtyard here with the communications department, and she's been an excellent job doing that, plus making sure that we remember who we are as a village, and as we continue to document who we will become and continue to become. So with that, with ado, I'd like to welcome our speaker. Thank you.
We've got two mics going here. This one is so you can hear me, and this one is for the camera because we are recording this for cable, for the village's cable television program. So if the mics bounce off each other, you'll know why. Where's Mike Walsh? There he is, taking a picture right there. Thank you, Trustee Calandrello. It was cute that, we know that he was born in 1984. I don't qualify as a townie. I'm married to one, but just to give you some background, we moved to Orland Park in 1972. We moved here because my father was working in Springfield, and it was close to I-80, so he would commute and come home on the weekends. I was going into 5th grade, so I do not qualify as a townie by no means. I'll declare that right off the bat, but I am married to a townie. My husband, Jerry, who's standing in the back of the room, born and raised in Orland Park, grew up on Beacon Avenue. Anyway, I wanted to know how many of you, or how many people in the room do we have that are lifelong Orland Park residents? Can you raise your hands? I see Mike Walsh. How many have lived here a long time? A lot of long-time residents. I see Maureen Wentz back there raising her hand. And then how many moved here, say, within the past 10, 20, 30 years? Okay, those of you who moved here from the city, to give you a point of reference, I'm from St. John Fisher. I was baptized at Little Flower. My father was from Sabina's, and my mother's from Viz, okay? Like I said, we moved here the summer before 5th grade at Park School. I remember the day we moved in, my father and I went up to Mr. Ed's to get lunch meat, because we had just moved into the house, and, mind you, I was originally from Evergreen Park, from 100th in California, by way of Springfield, and we went up to Mr. Ed's, and I had never seen so many pickup trucks in my life. Sorry, Mike. I thought we had moved to Iowa. When we moved to Silver Lake West, we could not get a phone. We lived on 88th Avenue. Our house backed up to the golf course. We could not get phone service, and the mailman would not come down the street. So we had to put our mailbox up on the corner, right across from the chamber office at 151st and 88th Avenue. There was no thought of identity theft. This was 1972. But my sisters and I would have to trot up to the corner to get the mail, because that's as far as the mailman would go. We did eventually get a telephone. One of our neighbors had 2 lines, and they graciously shared one of their lines with us. So we were in Silver Lake West 4 years before Orland Square was built. As far as Orland Park history, this is a passion of mine. My love for history comes from my father, Fred Owens, who was, the mayor of Orland Park, who died in '92. My dad was a Chicago high school history teacher. He taught at Hubbard High School for a long time, and every family vacation we would go on, he would find something historical for us to see. It had to be educational. Even when we went down to Disney World, we had to go over to St. Augustine. When we were in New York on a family vacation, he drove out of the way for 3 hours. I'm looking at Mrs. Manning over here, to take us to the Baseball Hall of Fame. He had 3 daughters. And we said, my mother said, why are we driving so far out of the way to go to the Baseball Hall of Fame? And his response was, prospective suitors will be impressed. So I've been to the Baseball Hall of Fame. I joined the village staff. I was a toddler. No, actually, I was a summer employee in 1977. I was a junior day camp counselor. Mind you, this was 2 years before the recreation department was actually formed in 1979. Those of you who have been around here for a long time remember when the Robert Davidson Center was called the Administration Building. Pat Franz was running recreation programs over there, Carol Binder, Donna Reitmeyer. Those are some names from the past. Then I came back as a summer kid, and I worked in Public Works with Jerry Monette and Linda Schrader. And those of you who have been out here for a long time may remember the little blue and orange bus in 1980. Mike Walsh, nod your head. I was the first dispatcher for that little blue bus. That was our little senior transportation, the predecessor to the Pace bus service that we have now. I was the village's first intern. We had never had an intern on staff before, and when I found out I could get college credit for what I was doing here, I jumped at it. So I was the village's first intern. I created our public information office in the late 80s as the thesis for my master's degree, and as the first intern, some of you may remember Durs Anderson, the village's first director of planning. My father used to call him the Renaissance man. He was a phenomenal planner, and he was the first planner Orland Park ever had, and he sent me out to take pictures. I was 19 years old, and it's the office building over near the Horton Plaza, like the 6 or 4-story office building over there. There's like dentist office in there now. And he said, go take a picture of this office building. I need it for the economic development stuff. So I'm 19, I go out there with the camera, I'm gonna take pictures. He didn't tell me that the FBI was in that building. They came out with guns. And they said, what are you doing? And of course, we didn't have cell phones. And I'm stuttering, I'm like, So I went back and let Durs, the next time you send me out to take pictures, let me know that the FBI is in there, they don't want their cars photographed. I've been a full-time village employee since 1987, so I've been telling people how wonderful Orland Park is for the last, 25 years or so. Anyway, like I mentioned, my husband is a townie. Jerry's parents moved to Orland Park in the 1930s. His grandfather, Paul Voss, Steph, you can hit his grandfather, Paul Voss, served as it's not a great picture, but it's one that had both of his grandfathers in it. Paul Voss served as a village trustee. He was fire chief, a police officer, and Orland Fire Station number 2 is named for him. And Paul Voss is standing up. He's the second from the right there in that picture. Eleanor Voss, Jerry's grandmother, some of you who are long time will remember the people from 135, District 135. Grandma Voss worked at 135 for a long time, and she was also the village's first police matron. Now, Tim McCarthy, the retired police officer, not the chief, who has Patty B's out on 143rd Street, he has a picture on the wall of the bar, and it's Frank Getter, who was the police chief at the time, with the black and white squad. Mike, you're nodding your head. In that picture, he said, if you identify everybody in that picture, you win a free drink. Well, the chief is Frank Getter, correct, Mike? And Jerry's grandmother, Eleanor Voss, is the only female in the picture. I don't know who the other cops are, so I'm getting, if you're ever out at Patty B's, if you can figure out who the rest of the people are, just know that the matron in that picture is Eleanor Voss. Jerry's paternal grandparents, Hank and Bernadette Klotz, also moved out here in the 30s. And those of you who have been out here for a long time may remember Ryan's gas station on LaGrange Road, which is where Wendy's in South Fork is now. They had Ryan's gas station, Country Cousins restaurant, and then they had the Night O Rest Motel. The Klotz family owned that, everything from LaGrange Road to 94th Avenue, where South Fork, Wendy's, Burger King is now. Jerry is a third-generation Orland firefighter. Both of his grandfathers and his father, they were all assistant chiefs, and Jerry was the first baby born in the region in 1965. We have a copy of the old Star Herald newspaper with Jerry's mom holding him as a baby from 1960. I think there were like 3 people living out here. No, I'm kidding, Jerry. But yeah, he was the first baby born in the region at Silver Cross, and he, like I said before, he grew up on Beacon Avenue. Now we're going to get into the meat of it. I just wanted to give you some background, and even though I'm not a townie, I do have credentials. Where's Bob Ellie? Bob Ellie, raise your hand. We've got the president of the Historical Society here. Don't correct me, Bob, okay? All right, as far as the origin of the name Orland, the village took its name from the township, which was formed in 1850. Now, when we were researching the village's centennial, Steph, you can hit, we wrote to the Chicago Historical Society and asked the origin of the name. You know, obviously we knew the village took it from the township. The township was started in 1850. They said there's an Orland, Maine, Orland, Norway, Orland, England. So there was any number of theories as far as where the name came from. This is one of the earliest maps of the township, and if you can see, the population right there is 504 for Orland Township. You can see how neatly mapped out the townships were. Next. In 1834, Henry Taylor moved to the area and settled in the area and moved west. And then Thomas Hardy arrived in 1836. In 1844, Ichabod and William Myrick served as the township first officials. And Bob, recently we had Jerry Myrick was a longtime resident of Orland Park, one of the ancestors of some of the township's first officials. He was active in the Historical Society with Bob and Vi Ellie. Other immigrants began coming from the British Isles. In the mid-1840s, the 10-year-old John Humphrey's parents moved to the area from England. And in the 1840s, the Luxembourgers and Germans began to arrive. And many of you are familiar with, you can hold it on that one, Steph, the Hostert brothers came to Orland Park in the 1840s. When Jacob returned from fighting in the Mexican War, he married Maria Horn and built a log cabin for his family on 143rd Street near Wolf Road. So where Pops is now, as a point of reference. His brother, Bernard, married and built a log cabin on 159th Street west of Wolf Road, and the log cabins on which were moved to West Avenue and are maintained by the Historical Society, they include many of the pieces from that period, all made before 1860. I took my Girl Scouts, who are now in their mid to late 20s, we went through the log cabins along, and it's just beautiful for them to be able to see, you know, how these families lived with the trundle bed and, you know, all the different antiques from the time. One of the first churches in the area, St. Mike's, was founded by Luxembourg brothers in 1847, and the parish's first church was at 151st and Wilcook Road. St. Michael Church is 25 years older than the village of Orland Park, which is interesting to know. Next. Orland Park was known as the English settlement with a grade school and the Methodist church. Next. John Humphrey. Okay, you've heard Humphrey Drive. All right, this picture here, I found this in our archives. This is the English Settlement Choir from the 1800s. This is one of the local choirs that would perform. And I don't know how long it would take to take a picture. You know, you hear that in the old-time pictures. They're waiting so long for the camera to go that they don't smile by the time it's the picture, but they almost got everybody. Next. There we are. John Humphrey was born in Norfolk, England on June 21st, 1838. That might be why he's not smiling either. In a December 1974 letter, John Stuart Humphrey, his son, wrote, "My father, when a boy, went to school held in a farmhouse in the English settlement." He wrote, in 1859, he went to Salt Lake City with oxen, and from Salt Lake City to California by pony. After studying law, Humphrey married and lived on a farm in the English settlement and commuted to his office in Chicago. Now get this, driving a horse and buggy to Tinley Park, where he took the train. Humphrey married his first wife, Amelia Patrick, in 1863. They had 3 children, Cook County Judge Wirt Humphrey, Clara B. Myers, and Maud Humphrey. When Amelia Patrick died in March of 1898, Mayor Humphrey married Ida Mae Stewart, and they had a son, John Stuart Humphrey, who died in 1987. You can hit next. Humphrey's office downtown, right, that's an old picture of the Humphrey House from the Historical Society, crediting Bob, I'm crediting the Historical Society. Humphrey's house was in the Monadnock building at the corner of Dearborn and Van Buren. Next. Now that's an old picture of Humphrey. It looks on the side of the house. We don't know who the other people are in the picture or which of his wives that is. Bob, do you know?
The man in the hat there, that's Worth Humphrey. That's Maud.
That's Maud?
I'm not sure about that.
Oh, that's his daughter. Okay. All right, when the Wabash, St. Louis, and Pacific Railroad came to Orland Park in 1879, which is really the big boom when they connected Orland Park with Decatur and Chicago. That's what really set it off. Humphrey bought land next to what was platted as the town center for the railroad stop. The Wabash Railroad and other people had named the train stop Sedgwick, but locals changed it to Orland. John Humphrey was elected to the Illinois House in 1870, the Senate in 1886, and he's remembered locally with the Humphrey Woods, the Humphrey Sports Complex, Humphrey Drive, next, and the life-size statue. There's another shot of the Humphrey House, which is also on the National Register of Historic Places. Thank you to the Bob Ellie and the folks at the Historical Society. They worked hard to get that on the National Register. This was the second house in Orland Park, which John Stewart Humphrey left to the Historical Society when he died in 1987. Next. And the first house, there's the statue. If you've ever been to the 143rd Street Station, that's it's cool to the people, the commuters are greeted by the first mayor of Orland Park. You got to go backwards, okay. All right, the first house was built by Orland Park's third mayor, Harry Cox, just 3 months before Humphrey's house. And when John Humphrey died, in 1914, when Humphrey died, Orland Park was the only community on the Wabash Railroad between here and Chicago that had village water, cement sidewalks, streetlights, a policeman, and a local jail called a calaboose. Next, it was the policeman's duty to start the water pumps. Those are some of the early minutes. I'll get to that in a second. It was the policeman's duties to start the water pumps, light the streetlights, and provide overnight lodging in the calaboose for an occasional hobo. Humphrey's funeral was held from his home in Orland on Monday, October 5th, 1914. All businesses in Orland and the vicinity was suspended, public schools were closed, and the school children, led by their teachers, marched past his bier to look their last upon their old friend, who always had a smile and a kindly word for each of them. Hundreds stood with uncovered heads in the little country cemetery where the simple last rites were pronounced. Mayor Humphrey is buried at Orland Memorial Cemetery at 153rd and West Avenue. What you're looking at here, these are the original handwritten minutes from a village board meeting in 1901. These have been preserved by the village clerk's office. And when the school kids come in, it's really, it's cool to see that they used, a quill and dipped it in ink to take attendance, and whoever was taking the minutes, and I forget who the clerk was at the time, you can see they made a mistake, and then they corrected the year up there at the very top of the page. But the clerk's office, the village clerk's office, has done a lot to preserve all of these minutes and documents and everything from the village's history, which is really cool because kids now can go back and say, well, they didn't type it in Word? It's like, no, they didn't. Next. All right, this is Charles Burkhart. When I saw this picture, I thought, wow, that's a crabby-looking Humphrey, but it's not. Charles Burkhart served as mayor after John Humphrey's death. So he was mayor for a year from 1914 until 1915. Next. All right, the Cox House. Harry Cox was the third mayor of Orland Park. He was elected after Charles Burkhart, and he served until 1923. And the first house in the village was his. Next, you can see this on 2nd Avenue. And those of you familiar with, now when Joyce Laby, we did an old Orland tour with Joyce Laby as Girl Scouts, and you see where the front of the house is facing. Actually, this side of the house is 2nd Avenue where the opening is over here, but the house is facing the other way, and that's the street that was never finished. Mike, do you remember that? Grove Street? It was the street that was, they never finished the street. So when we did our Girl Scout tour in the 90s, I think now they've made it a driveway or they've paved over it, but the first house in Orland Park faced a street that was never finished. Okay, what's next? All right, this is the Sidwell. It's a 1957 or 1940 Sidwell, and you can see Grove Street is on there. You probably can't see it. We ran this in one of the past village publications, but the street was an actual part of the Sidwell, but they just never finished it. Okay, next. There's Harry Cox. He was the mayor from 1915 to 1923, and his family contacted us recently, like in the past few years. They were tracing their family tree, and we sent them pictures of the house, and we sent his picture his picture hangs in the lobby of the Village Hall, just to, because they wanted to know, we heard that he was an Orland Park, he was an Orland Park official, what was he? So it was cool to connect with his great-great-grandchildren, let them know, the role that he played in Orland Park. Next. I see we have trustee Pat Gira has joined us back there. Oh, she's talking. 1883, the population was less than 300. Here we go. The town voted 98-1 to allow for the construction of a saloon. This one, now Mike, this was Estan's, is this Barney's? This is Barney's Saloon, I think. Which one, is it Cresby's? Cresby's Saloon. Yeah, who was the holdout? But look at, she's holding a gun. It's like, well, what do you have? But anyway, by 1884, the businesses included 2 saloons, 2 general stores, 1 blacksmith, a wagon shop, and a furniture store. And a lady holding a gun in the saloon. Okay, go ahead. All right, there's the Orland Hotel. Now, this building still stands. It's one of the few buildings left with the ornate Italian-type architecture. It is now Old Orland Insurance. The Murphy family is in there. You can see the horse and buggy and the people outside of the hotel. Now, when we did our Old Orland tour with Joyce Laby, I don't know if many of you remember Joyce Laby. She was a local teacher. She was one of the founders of the Historical Society, and she was one of the biggest preservationists of Orland Park history. And I wish I would have videotaped her tour when we did the tour. I kick myself now. But anyway, when we were at this building, she said that guests would stay at the hotel, now the Old Orland Insurance, and they would walk across the street to what is now the Irish Patriot, which was, this is the 1800s, Mike, I don't think you go back that far. They would walk across the street to the restaurant, which is now the Irish Patriot, for chicken dinners on Sunday afternoons, and then they would do duck pin bowling behind the hotel. So, which is like smaller versions of, smaller version of the bowling pins. Next. All right, this picture is neat. If you look at the train station, you can see that, I don't know what year this is from. It was from one of the train books. But look behind it. That's the building that the Irish Patriot is in now. So you can see where the train station was right behind that building, which is neat, because when we were growing up, it was more along Southwest Highway. But this is where it's actually behind the restaurant. In 1894, the Orland Park Volunteer Fire Department was formed. Next, I'm not sure what I have for this one. All right, this is, the sign, sorry it's out of focus, I didn't take the picture, I wasn't there. Orland Park Volunteer Fire Department across the door, across the top there, the trim up there. Bob, we got this from the Historical Society for the Centennial Celebration. This is where the current Old Village Hall is on Beacon Avenue, okay? So the Village Hall, all the way back to the 1800s, was always at that site on Beacon Avenue. That's the water tower in back. You'll see I have another picture, which is cool, and I've got a Franklin Laby story to go with it. But the Volunteer Fire Department was formed 2 years after the village was incorporated, and it remained the Orland Park Fire Department until the Fire Protection District was formed in 1969. Now, local legend has it, those of you who are out here, the fire department broke off from the village because the village wouldn't pay for a fire truck, or there's some controversy like that. So that's when they voted by referendum in 1969 to form the Orland Fire Protection District. How we explain it to people who are new to Orland Park is we are opposite of the city of Chicago. We have a Parks Department, Recreation and Parks Department, and a fire district, where Chicago has a park district and a fire department. So that's how we explain it. 1898, next. All right, these are 2 buildings that still stand, both of which have been remodeled. On the left is the United Methodist Church that was built in 1898, and on the right is the German Lutheran Church, which is now a real estate office at 143rd and West Avenue, right near St. Mike's, near Park School. The one on the left, That's the Twin Towers. When we were little, we thought like a plane crashed into it or something. That's why one tower was shorter than the other, but that wasn't the story. You can switch stuff. In 1987, all right, that's the German Lutheran Church at 143rd and 143rd and West. Go ahead. There's another shot with the pastor's picture in the inset. Evangelical. Oh, that's written in German. Yes, Christus Kirche. And you look at the street. Look at the street, and it's the wooden sidewalks going up. That's 143rd Street. Yes. See the wooden sidewalks going. But there's telephone poles. Go ahead. And here's another shot. The Twin Towers on the left, with like the dirt road, and on the right, that house is still there. That's always known as I see Joe Glider, the Laby house. From what I understand, that was a wedding gift for one of the Laby daughters. Is that right, Bob? It was given as a wedding gift, the house in the early 1900s? Okay, thanks. On the Twin Towers, next. There we are. The Twin Towers. When my father was mayor in 1987, the pastor at the time wanted to tear this down to build a parking lot. I don't think he realized that the mayor of Orland Park was a history teacher. So my father was pretty much over my dead body, will you tear down this church? And the pastor was rather flippant. This was in a meeting at the Old Village Hall on Beacon Avenue, and the pastor said, well, if you want it, you can have it. And my dad said, well, if it would fit in the trunk of my car, I would take it home tonight. So our family is especially proud of this building because my father, we credit him with saving it. That's when they created the Old Orland Heritage Foundation, which was the third not-for-profit group that restored this, and there's longtime wonderful, wonderful volunteers who restored the church, the windows, the pew. I mean, they worked very hard on this building, and it was weird. They rededicated the building on the 10th anniversary of when my dad died, which they didn't know it was the 10th anniversary until I went over there, and I said, it was just a freaky coincidence. Go ahead, Steph. All right, Laby Brothers General, this is just an old house picture that we had. You can see where the house is raised up. I don't know who it is. Bob, do you know who that is? Go ahead. Excuse me. All right, there's Cresby's Saloon. All right, that's where we saw the shot earlier of the woman inside with the gun. These are people waiting outside because they're afraid of the gun. No, but this building is still on the corner, Mike. This building is still there. And I remember when in Joyce Lottie's tour, when we looked at this building, she said there was a family entrance if people wanted to go in, or there was a quilting room across the street on the second floor of, I don't even remember what building is over there, where the women could go quilt while their husbands went to the saloon. Really? But I think most of them want to go in the family entrance and go enjoy the saloon. Go ahead. Here we are. All right, Laby Brothers. Laby, not Loeb. I know, I heard it from Franklin himself, Laby. All right, this is very cool. The building still stands. You've seen it on Union Avenue. We're guessing that's like a 1955, 56 car. I posted this picture on Facebook yesterday, and Jerry's uncle, who's down in Kentucky, I asked if that was him on the right side, and he said, no, the kid was too short to be him. But anyway, this is cool because the first bay of this building was originally a stagecoach stop 4 miles east of Orland Park. They moved it to Union Avenue in 1879 when the railroad came through. Henry Lawn was the first owner of the store, and then he sold it to John and Albert Laby in 1898. And this is right, the building is still there, right? If you're familiar with Old Orland, right on Union Avenue. And then when shoppers would get off the train, they had to cross to the store by balancing on planks, which were laid across the muddy street. Now, I'm talking, early 1900s. This picture is from the 1950s, so you can see there's some semblance of a sidewalk, and they've got the cement stairs and, the gravel street. In the early 1900s, the old wooden sidewalks that had been down since 1892 were torn up and replaced with concrete sidewalks. In the meantime, women wearing long dresses with trains kept the sidewalks clean. And Orland Park residents could talk with those in Chicago when the Chicago Telephone Company completed its line at the turn of the century. A second phone company had lines in town, and homes with both services had complete service. Next. There he is. This is one of my all-time favorite Orland Park people. Franklin Laby, and you're familiar with him because of the recreation center. Franklin Laby was the village treasurer for 65 years. He was a gentleman and a gentleman. You would see him, he would tip his hat. He was just a great guy. I'll start out at the beginning. Okay, he was born in 1906 on the same day as the San Francisco earthquake. He was born above the general store on Union Avenue, the building that we just saw. He had an office in the village hall before he retired, and I would take my old pictures over there and say, Franklin, who's this? And he'd say, oh, Marge, that's so-and-so, they married so-and-so. And he'd give me a full family tree, and then I would love to get him talking about when he was a kid, because he would talk about in 1918, so Franklin was 12, the water tower behind the village hall fell, and it flooded the entire neighborhood. And Franklin, how he described it was, he said it was a big happening in a small town, and the water ran down the street, and everything pooled in Humphrey's yard. Down from the Humphrey house, there's like an incline, so that's where all the water ended up. You can go next. Franklin attended school on 143rd Street. It's his birth certificate. He gave it to me for my history files. I have his birth certificate and his marriage license, so I will never forget Franklin Laby. It was just so cool, 1906, yep. Next. He attended school on 143rd Street, and there was no high school out here. There he is talking when he retired at the village board. There's a young Kathy Fenton in the background of that picture. Do you see her? He took the train down to Englewood for high school. He enrolled at Northwestern University and spent a year and a half studying business and accounting before his father got sick. But while he was at Northwestern, he played in the band when Notre Dame's Newt Rockne and the Four Horsemen played Northwestern. How cool is that? I just got goosebumps. Franklin served as Orland Park treasurer for 65 years, and to show what a gentleman he was 23 years old, hanging out at the train station with his friends, when in 1929, Mayor Ralph Jennings walked over to ask if he'd serve as village treasurer. Now, Franklin did not want to take another man's job. He's just a nice guy. So at first he was hesitant. He said, Marge, I don't want to, you don't call me Marge, Sharon. Archibald Kay, the ticket agent, had been village treasurer, and Franklin did not want to take another man's job. So he hesitated at first, and then once he found out that Mr. Kay no longer wanted to be treasurer, that's when Franklin took the job. He was chosen because he had the only adding machine in town. He had a background in accounting, and his family was the first family in Orland Park to own a television set. The Labys were well off. Franklin was one of the few men in town during the day, as most people worked downtown or outside of town. And if there was a fire, Franklin would hop into his pickup truck. Okay, he's at the general store. He's got to get over to Beacon Avenue, which is pretty much around the corner. He would hop into his truck and fly over to the village hall on Beacon, picking up the men who were responding to the fire. And one of the stories that he told me, he said they were going to help put out a fire in another town. And he talked about how he took the Cal-Sag Bridge too fast en route to a fire in a nearby town, and he said, I looked back and all my passengers had fallen off the truck. And I said, Franklin, what did you do? And he said, well, I turned around and picked them up, and they were all waiting with their fists up, thinking he had done this on purpose. Franklin married Dorothea Walski in 1942, and they moved into the apartment above the general store, and then they moved up the hill to his parents' Union Avenue house in 1974, where they lived for several years. And those of you familiar with Union Avenue, that's where time stood still. That is like the untouched street in Orland Park. But there's some development going on around there now, but like Schmedeke Funeral Home way up at the top, it's like you go up that hill, and it's like Brigadoon. You're going back in time. Franklin's brother Stuart was a longtime member of the village's plan commission, and they sold the store in 1969. So those of you who grew up in Orland Park, it was sold before we moved here. My sister-in-law and my in-laws obviously remember going down to Laby's general store. Was it, Mike, the only place you could buy Levi's and Lee's? Is that what somebody posted? And Penny Candy. There's a great page on Facebook. It's called You Know You're From Orland Park. And Mike Walsh is one of the big contributors, and they're posting the old pictures and memories. And it's cool because they're finding people from, has anybody seen so-and-so? Where's so-and-so live? Hey, you live next door to me. It's really cool. And a lot of the stories, they talked to, there's a whole section on Laby's store, which was really neat. And then Joyce Lottie, I don't know how they would get to do this, but she said the kids would soap the windows at Laby's store on Halloween. Were you part of that, Mike? Okay.
I wasn't there.
excuse me, in January 1990, the village board named the recreation center, where is it? There, right over there, after Franklin. And what was cool is that he was still alive. He was alive to see it. And his office at the village hall looked out at the building named for him. And when I would do the village hall tours, we would tell the kids, imagine working in a building and looking outside and seeing a building named for you. And they would be like, you know, it was cool, because they would give him a piece of paper and ask him for his autograph. And he just got such a kick out of watching, you know, he'd see the preschoolers going in and out, and he knew when they were late because the parents were running, but he loved to watch the building named for him. He retired in '93 after 65 years, and we believe he holds the unofficial record for the longest-serving municipal official in the state of Illinois. I tried to get him on Jay Leno, but they wouldn't take it. But he died of pneumonia on January 30th, 2004, and he was a true gentleman, great guy. Next. Okay, that's the old village. There's the water tower. That's the water tower that Franklin talked about that fell in 1918 and flooded all of Orland Park, because it was all one neighborhood. So it says Village Hall and Pumping Station, and that was the Village Hall, and the village meetings were held up on the second floor up there. And that is the Beacon Avenue site where the old Village Hall is right now. Go ahead, Steph. All right, that's 143rd and Beacon. The post office was right there. This is another picture that I came across. So that building is still there, but that's where the post office was, and you can see like the dirt roads. Go ahead. And this is the first school. This is where Franklin Laby went to grammar school. This building still stands on 143rd Street. It's a private home now. You can see in the porch, they still have the balls. You see the cement balls on the porch where the kids are. Somebody had said something recently, a family, when they bought it, they took down the wallpaper and they could see like their chalkboards, or took down paneling or something, but the original chalkboards from the school. But yeah, that's a private home now, right on 143rd Street, near Dr. Gemino's office. Do you know what I'm talking about right there? Go ahead, Steph. And that's one of the old train pictures. So imagine a young Franklin Laby in 1929 hanging out at the train station when the mayor came over to ask him to be village treasurer. Go ahead. And there's his building. Go ahead. Okay, this is pretty neat. I don't know if I mean, those of you who have been out here for a long time will know that there was a ghost town. Well, not really. Well, we're not even going to touch on ghosts. But anyway, Alpine, Illinois. Alpine, Illinois. Bob Elliott is nodding. All right, Alpine, those of you, I don't know if you're familiar with it, it was located 30 miles southwest of Chicago and 3 miles southwest of Orland Park. It was about 100 yards north of 167th and Wolf Road. So those of you who live out on the west side, there was a town out there at one point. It was along Marley Creek, along the west side of the Wabash, St. Louis and Pacific Railroad. It was originally established as a railroad station in 1891, possibly as early as 1881. In 1910, Alpine was at its peak with a blacksmith shop, the Methodist church, a feed mill, Cooper's store, with a dance hall in the rear, 2 saloons, a railroad depot, and in 1912, a fire destroyed the town. So where Alpine Heights is now, the subdivision is named for the ghost for the town of Alpine, which is, you know, cool to know. They had saloons right across from the train depot. Go ahead. This one is here. This was downtown Alpine, and you can see Homerding Saloon, Albert Cooper's store, Shafford's Saloon, the Alpine Depot. It was a little booming town that died once because there was a fire, and the fire destroyed the town. See, Paw, some of the cedar, well, the cedar would probably be Common Beach. Orange, there looks like the orange, no, there's an orange in Alpine Heights too. They may have named some of the streets after the original town. Go ahead. See that Alpine was once a thriving town, and this is from a 1940 newspaper showing the town of Alpine. Okay, go ahead. I don't know if that's Alpine or not, but a telegrapher's strike began the town's woes, before the fire. The fire put the town into a tailspin, and since there was no central water, the 3 buildings burned to the ground, and it just crippled the dreams of Alpine. And then shortly after the fire, the railroad depot was no longer used. It was torn down during World War II, leaving Alpine a vacant site. And around 1941, Cook County officially announced the disappearance of Alpine when it was removed from the state's tax list. You can go ahead, Steph. One of the other things is I was reading through a lot of stuff for today, and we had talked about this, and Gail Blummer, I don't know if she's still in here, Orland Park had a 40 and 8 camp. Bob, are you familiar with this? Yes? Who's saying yes over here? 1931, the Chicago Tribune, perhaps the McCormick Foundation, if it existed then, used Forest District property to create a convalescent home for Heinz Hospital World War I veterans. It was called a 40 and 8 camp, named after French rail cars that transported 40 men and 8 horses. North of 143rd Street, north of St. Mike's? Am I looking at Mrs. Gronke? I see you. Real Girl Scout leader. So that's something else to, about Orland Park history, was a 40 and 8 camp that was here in 1931. And then in 1933, Orland Lake was renamed McGinnis Slough, and that's where families would take their horse and buggies down to, you know where McGinnis Slough is, right on the Grange Road there. That's where they would have their family picnics, and they would take the horse and buggy down there for recreation. Go ahead, Steph. The Orland Park Library was created in 1937. All right, we're looking at Park School, because I just said 1937. You'll see this picture, there's no gymnasium on there. The limestone gymnasium was built in 1937 as part of the federal work project. Go ahead, Steph. All right, Park School. Carl Sandburg High School opened in 1954. My father-in-law graduated from high school, from Park School, and this was his 1978 reunion from the class of 1954 from Orland Park High School. So that's from their reunion. This is the class that graduated high school from Park School. Go ahead. And there's the limestone gymnasium. Go. There's an aerial shot, which is from the 1930s. Go. All right, I'm showing you 143rd Street. You see Laby's Realtor, the barber shop, the Mercury dealership. If you look further down, you can see where the Irish Patriot is now. The building, the library, those of you who have been out here a long time remember that the library opened in 1937 in what was called the Purple Candle Building. And it was named that because the building at one time housed the Purple Candle restaurant. When Heather from the Prairie, Heather Worthen, was researching the library's anniversary, she pulled up the original list of library card holders, and Jerry's grandmother had library card number 3. So it shows, how far back it goes. Go ahead, Steph. All right, this is fun. 1936, the Federal Writers Project. They evaluated Orland Park. No accommodations for tourists, no point of interest, no tours of model homes, no seasonal events, no folk customs, no tours, no industries. Town does not seem to be going forward. Come visit us. 1940, the village population increased to 650. Go ahead, Steph. All right, Bob Ellie, this is for you. Schraggy's Restaurant was at 159th and Wolf Road. This picture is from the night, what? I was going to get to that. Let me get to that. Bob Ellie, raise your hand, in the middle of the room, was a busboy at Schraggy's, which was at 159th and Wolf Road. Which corner was that, Bob? Whoops. Northwest? Northwest corner of 159th and Wolf? Southwest? It was in the middle of the intersection. Go ahead, Steph. And there we are. There's an aerial view of Schraggy. So think of the area near the Sportsplex now. That's where, now you came out from the city, Bob. They drove you out here from the city to work as a busboy?
I worked for Schraggy's, butcher shop, and I was a delivery boy there.
In the city?
The city, and his cousin, or his nephew, Orville, used to drive me out there on Saturday night. We'd hunt rabbits, adjacent farm there. We stayed up in the attic in the building.
Then did you serve the rabbits for dinner? I'm kidding. Okay, go ahead, Steph. All right, there's Carl Sandburg High School. I was trying to find an old picture from 1954 when it opened. My mother-in-law sang in the choir at the dedication ceremony at Sandburg, which was pretty cool in 1954. And she said when Carl Sandburg, who was alive at the time, he had been invited to the dedication ceremony, they questioned him because he was so disheveled. They weren't sure who he was. They thought it was a hobo or somebody trying to come into the school. So they weren't going to let Carl Sandburg into his school. But I think they did eventually. Go ahead. Orland Days. Okay, this goes back a long time, and we have, I see Ray Manring. Hey, Ray. Mayor Mel Dugan and George Brown organized a Sunday afternoon picnic and parade with a few floats and the village's only piece of fire equipment. And Orland Days, I mean, they can trace it all the way back to the family picnics that they used to hold at McGinnis Slough. I want to step back for a minute. I see Ray Manring. I mentioned earlier the Old Orland Heritage Foundation. Raise your hand, Ray. Ray was the driving force behind restoring the Twin Towers. So Ray is one of our great local preservationists. So thank you for all that you did for the Twin Towers, Ray. Sure.
Bob Wilson lives in one of the older homes right across the street from the Twin Towers, and he's taken over my job of keeping it going.
Oh, really?
Can you stand up, Bob?
Oh, there you are, Bob. Hi, Bob. Thank you.
We live in the Laby home.
Do you really? Oh, how cool is that? Do you know if it was a wedding gift? It was? You didn't? It was. I thought Joyce Lottie or Jerry Myrick had told me that one of the Laby daughters got that house as a wedding gift. How cool is that? That is cool. Go ahead, Steph. All right, here's the old village hall with some of the old fire gear. People had asked, how are we called the World's Golf Center? That was something that the Chamber of Commerce did in the 1960s. In the early 1980s, Orland Park had 711 holes of golf within a 10-mile radius. I'm not sure what the number is now, but they totaled up all of the golf courses, and that's where we got the World's Golf Center. The Chamber pushed for that. This is one of the pictures that has been traveling on Facebook. You can see the old ambulance there, and if you visualize the old village hall now, you can see where the truck bay was, where the fire trucks and the ambulances would pull out of. Go ahead. There we are. You can see the fire truck and the old ambulance in the truck bay. Beacon Avenue. The Beacon Avenue Old Village Hall was built by volunteer firemen and dedicated in 1961 when Mayor Schuessler was in office. And then after Mayor Schuessler, we had Mel Dugan, who was elected in 1965 and served for 20 years. He served as a village trustee before he was elected mayor, and Mel Dugan, who my mother-in-law refers to as Melly, which I guess that's what they called him when he was younger, he's remembered with Dugan Park, Dugan Pavilion, and he's buried at the Orland Memorial Cemetery as well at 153rd and West Avenue. Okay, go ahead. Oh, there we are, Dugan Park. Go ahead, Steph. And then you'll see the Dugan Pavilion over at the John Humphrey Complex. That's named for Mayor Dugan, who was mayor for 20 years. And he was mayor when Orland Square came, so he was here during a very busy time. Go ahead. All right, now I don't know how many of you know who this is. Does anybody know who this is? Ronald Lloyd Zinn, born May 10th, 1939 in Peoria, died July 7th, 1965. The Zinn family lived in the original Orland Hills up near 135th and Southwest Highway. After graduating from Sandburg, Zinn graduated from the United States Military Academy at West Point. He served in the Vietnam War. Captain Zinn was killed in a firefight near Saigon while serving in the 173rd Airborne Brigade of the United States Army. Ron Zinn was the first kid from Orland Park killed in Vietnam. He was also a U.S. Olympian. He was the community's first Olympian. He was the champion in the 2-mile race walk in the early 60s. He participated in the 20,000-meter race walk in the 1960 Olympics, finishing 19th and then finishing 6th in the 64 Olympics. And the U.S. Track and Field, they have a Captain Ronald Zinn Memorial Award. He was recently posthumously inducted into the District 230 Legacy Hall of Fame, and his brother, Jerry Zinn, came out for the ceremony. Go ahead, Steph. And I'm going to explain something at the end of my presentation. There he is in his Olympic clothing. Go ahead. He's buried in the United States Military Academy Post Cemetery at West Point in New York. And his grave includes his military wings and his Olympic emblem. Go ahead, Steph. And locally, he's remembered with the Ronald Zinn Fitness Trail and a small monument between Recreation Administration and the Laby Center. These are some of the Boy Scouts from our troop, and I'll explain what they're doing at this monument at the end of my talk, but that's the monument for Ronald Zinn. So we had a U.S. Olympian who was the first kid killed in Vietnam from Orland Park. Go ahead. This one is tragic. This is one of the biggest tragedies in Orland Park history. The Biddle family. I don't know how many of you would remember this, but Tragedy came to Orland Park on December 30th, 1968, when 5 members of one family were killed on the 15800 block of 113th Court, so out near the Sportsplex in unincorporated Orland Township. The story goes that the mother had driven an older daughter to catch an early morning train, returning home to find her 8-room frame home fully involved. And the family members who died included the dad, Marion Biddle, 2 sons, Matthew, age 9, and Danny, age 7, daughter, Georgianne, age 15, and John Hunt, the 80-year-old grandfather. This is a picture from the Tribune, that from the day after the fire or later in the same day. But the family members, they're all buried in a row at St. Mike's Cemetery at 159th and Will Cook. And we noticed it because my dad is buried at St. Mike's, and you see all of the Biddles and the ones who have died since the fire are buried out there as well, but it's a whole row of an entire family. Go ahead. All right, 1970, the village population is recorded at 6,400. Those of you who are out here for a long time, in 1972, a series of explosions leveled the Melrose Fireworks Company, breaking windows all the way to Blue Island. 3 people were killed, and this was before we moved out here. This was about 164th, 104th, Mike? Where was Melrose? Is that where it was, Maureen? And this, go ahead, Steph, made national news. This is one of the national, you can't see the picture, but this was from like a New York newspaper. Chicago blast levels buildings. But everybody on the you know you're from Orland page remembers where they were. And most of you guys, you were in school. No, you were in school when the explosion happened. Yes?
We lived in Chicago around 76th and Pulaski, and that thing rattled the windows.
Really? Oh my gosh. Did you hear that? He lived at 76th and Pulaski in the city, and it rattled their windows in Chicago when Melrose blew up out here in 1972. Go ahead, Steph. Does anybody know what that is? All right, the Rocking Chair Lounge. I couldn't resist. This was a favorite watering hole right at 147th and Ravinia, 147th and LaGrange, and this is where you went if you didn't have an ID and wanted a drink and wanted to go see Barry Summers. But Hooper family owned it, and it closed 10 or 15 years ago, but I don't know where this picture came from. The cars look fairly recent, but yeah, the Rocking Chair Lounge is a big part of Orland Park history. It was funny, and go ahead. In the 1970s, all right, here's an old picture from the fire department from the 1970s. I'm not going to tell which one is Jerry in the picture, but it's cool to see. That's Bob Buse on the bottom, Sonny Morgan. You probably recognize Bill Bonner, third from the left. I can't see who the rest of them are. But in the 1970s, I remember, that this is my era. Like I said, we moved here in 72. I remember when the Dairy Queen opened on LaGrange Road. The big question was whether or not it would stay open all year, or unless it was just like a summer tasty freeze. I remember when the McDonald's was built at 144th and LaGrange. That was our highlight, because we lived in Silver Lake West. We would cut through Fairway, take the hill down where the Schwinn shop is now, and ride our bikes up to Mr. Ed's or up to Dairy Queen or to any of the stores. Those of us who grew up in Orland Park in the 1970s, you didn't have to give somebody your whole phone number. All right, those of you who are from the city, remember you were like HU80334, or the old city numbers. Out here it was Fieldbrook 9, FI9, oh, Mrs. Gronke's smiling. So when you gave somebody your phone number at school, you just gave them the last 4 numbers, because everybody had the 349 exchange. And there are a lot of us who grew up here, we will not give up those 349 phone numbers. I don't care if I have 17 cell phones in my house, I am not giving up that 349 phone number. The other thing we had talked about, let's see, go ahead, Steph. When I was going to Park School, and I put this up here, if you remember Beepies across from Park School, and Helen Stone was my Girl Scout leader. Helen Stone isn't here, is she? Okay, good, I can tell her that. I ditched Girl Scouts one day, Beepies, now it's like Chef Klaus or something, it's a little diner, but we would walk from Park School over to Beepies and get our Starbursts and our Coke, and then we would have our Girl Scout meetings in the basement of the Twin Towers. Ray, you remember me telling you that? My Girl Scout meetings were down there? But yeah, this, Jylan's Flowers, this is where Old Orland Insurance is now, which was the Old Orland Hotel, and then Beepies was next door. And the other thing with the people growing up in the 1970s, everybody went to school with the Zamparelli. we have, Frankie Zamparelli works for the village. If you grew up in Orland Park in the 1970s, they had 10 kids, and they lived in Fairway, and their name was painted on the roof of their house. But if you grew up in Orland Park in the 1970s, you knew a Zamparelli. You can go ahead and change it. The smaller stores had not opened, so I'm back at Park School. The smaller stores had not opened, so we would race from Sears to Fields to see who could get there faster before the smaller stores opened. That opened during the nation's bicentennial year. If you remember, Orland Park's fire hydrants were painted red, white, and blue. That's the year the Orland Historical Society was formed. And then Plitt Orland Square Theaters opened in June of 1977. That was my first job. I worked there from 77 until 82. So if any of you were ever carded during that time for an R-rated movie, it was probably me. Go ahead, Steph. All right, 1985, this is my dad, which is pretty cool. The regional news came across this picture. That's the village hall behind him. So he's standing at the groundbreaking for the village hall, the building literally right outside the corner, not knowing that he would die and the building would be named for him. But anyway, my dad was elected in 85, mayor in 85. He was a trustee. He was elected trustee in 79, and before that he served on the District 135 school board. I would say that he's best remembered for pushing for the village manager form of government and for bringing Lake Michigan water to Orland Park, and his love for history. He would take the Historical Society downtown. They'd go to Pullman, they'd go to the Florence Hotel, they'd go to the Graceland Cemetery. He was an authority on Chicago history, and he was, very proud of Orland Park's history, which is probably, I'm sure, where I get it. Go ahead. Kay Shalander, the old bank building, which is really neat to see. I mean, that's still in Old Orland. Go ahead. Another aerial shot of Orland Park. And then some other milestones. You can keep advancing stuff. 2002, the debut of the Village Sportsplex, the improvements at 143rd and LaGrange. This is the Veterans Memorial right outside here, which was dedicated in 1999. Go ahead. Keep going. This is for the Winter Festival. And then, and throughout all the years, Orland Park has continued to maintain the small-town charm first discovered in Old Orland more than 120 years ago. Keep going. We still have the Boley Farm. The Boley Farm is preserved. The Stellwagen Farm is preserved. Those are both part of Mayor McLaughlin's open lands. And Glenn Boley, he's a whole story in itself as far as the history of the area. He's fascinating to talk to. Go ahead. And there's the Stellwagen Farm, which will remain a farm, which is part of the village's open lands program, which is really cool, because kids will be able to go out there and see. I mean, this was a dairy farm. They'll be able to see exactly, how it worked. Go ahead. And that's our theater troupe. Franklin Laby talked about doing different shows and stuff when he was a kid, and we have one of the best theater troupes in the region. Go ahead. Ball fields at Centennial Park, which I'm sure you understand, it was dedicated in 1992 during the village's centennial celebration. Go ahead. And then quality places, natural spaces. That's the theme of the village's comprehensive plan, as they're tying in. You can keep going, tying in the history, and there's the pool. Go ahead. And then I had to throw in the 4th of July. Go ahead. And there's Old Orland again, which is beautiful. Go ahead. And there's the Orland Park, the old water tower. As you look at Old Orland up there, you can see Mitchell's Flowers and Beacon Avenue. Go ahead. And there's the Sportsplex that opened in 2002, which on the site of Doctor School, if anybody went to Doctor School out there, go ahead. Taste of Orland Park, go ahead. I like my veterans, can you tell? Go ahead. Catherine Foster, there's the Village Hall. Past mayors of Orland Park, you can see John Humphrey, Harry Cox, Charles Burkhart, Mel Dugan, my dad. The two Schuslers, father and son Schuslers. Okay, go ahead. Next. All right, those of you on social media, how many of you are on Facebook? We have a very active Village of Orland Park Facebook page. We update it regularly, and we have a big section, and what gets the biggest hits is the historical stuff. So be sure to look for us on Facebook. We tweet constantly. We have our own YouTube channel. Go ahead. And my closing note is, if you look closely at the statue of Mayor Humphrey, with everything that's been accomplished for more than the past 120 years, you'll see that he's smiling. But there's one other thing that I want to talk about. I had mentioned, you saw the picture of the Boy Scouts with Ronald Zinn. Gail, were you in here for that? Oh, I have a whole section on Ron Zinn. Gail is all things military in Orland Park, for those of you who don't know. How many of you are familiar with geocaching? Have you ever heard of geocaching? Okay. Geocaching is when you put in the coordinates in a GPS system or like an iPhone or something, and it leads you to a spot, and you're usually looking for a prize. They're not buried, it's not metal detecting, it's just a way to get out. They do them all over the place. Anyway, what our Boy Scout troop did last year, which is totally cool, and the guys actually had fun doing it, they chose 20 landmarks in Orland Park. They got the coordinates. Jerry took them out with the GPS. We got the coordinates for each one. So when they get, the coordinates lead them to the site. And when they get there, they have to ask, this is a geo-challenge. I'll start at the beginning. Mayor McLaughlin sponsored this with our Boy Scout troop. And Dan paid for the prizes for this for people who complete it and bring it in. But you use the coordinates to get to the site. It's basically a living history tour of Orland Park. Our guys chose their 28 favorite spots. We had some help from the parents, and the ones that said Rocking Chair Lounge were voted down. So we're not going to put the Rocking Chair Lounge on our Boy Scout geo-challenge. But it's cool because it leads you to the site, and then when you get there, you have to ask a question. So the scouts went out last year and went to each one of these sites, got the coordinates, and came up with a question. Like, it was first a hotel, what is it now? It's the insurance company. We've had a number of scout troops and families do this, and it's walking and it's a bit of driving, but it's a great way to, to see the village's history, which is really neat.